environmental pollution. Mr. Lakhu Luhana is interested principal consultant of air quality at Bureau Veritas. Lakhu Luhana is responsible for assessing, monitoring, and reviewing the air quality impacts resulting from a variety of sources and development projects. Lakhu Luhana also assists local authorities in the duties for local air quality management and the policy support. Please, Mr. Lakhu.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, basically my presentation, there have been some wonderful presentations and discussing the specific aspects of environmental issues and the vulnerabilities of that area. Basically, my presentation is an overview of environmental degradation in Gilgit-Baltistan, with particular emphasis resulting from the development that is either currently taking place or is proposed in that area. And basically also as well that we believe that the world is one place, whatever happens, say for example climate change issues. Therefore whatever happens in one place cannot be isolated, cannot be separated, but is not segregated into compartments. Whatever happens in Gilgit and Baltistan has a direct and severe relevance what happens to my part of the world, which is called Sindh. Now, I'll just briefly, the format of the presentation, quickly define what is environmental degradation, and also an overview, what are the international law and policy in terms of environmental degradation, and Abdul Hamid Khan has presented a historical perspective and overview of the area. I'll just look at the area from the environmental point of view, and what are the major environmental issues and hazards that are being generated as a result of development in that area. I'll probably, during that process, I will just leave some of these slides because they already have been discussed, and concentrate on issues that I think will be different and assisted to this discussion. And then I'll also discuss what happens in Gilgit and Baltistan, how it is influencing the environment in Sindh, and finally the conclusions. Now, United Nations set up a basically high-level trade panel in 2003. Now, that panel was set up for the purpose to identify the threats for peaceful and existence, for the stability of humankind and the environment in which the humans live, including the ecosystems and habitats. Now, among that, they identified 10 threats, and among that, these 10 threats, environmental degradation is on number 3. There are other issues, for example, like weapons of mass destruction, and for example terrorism, but environmental degradation stands at number 3. Now, the environmental degradation from the point of the panel is defined as the depletion of the resources. It is basically the pollution of the environment, and when we say environment, it is the whole media of the environment, and that includes basically the air, water, soil, and also the loss of ecosystems and wildlife. Now, there are a number of international conventions, frameworks, and basically agreements that set up the standards and for a number of environmental issues. It has been mentioned that climate change is a reality. That reality within the scientific community started about 40-50 years ago. But in 70s and the 1992, the United Nations established the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Kyoto Protocol, by which it is thought necessary that even the dangers posed by the climate change could be more severe and could be more widespread than even the nuclear disaster. And then the sustainable development, there is the Rio Declaration of Environment and Development, that the development, yes, but development should not be at the cost of the future generations. We have to develop, but we have to develop in a way that is viable, because after us there will be thousands of generations will be coming, and we cannot basically compromise their existence and their survival and their continuity and their viability. Then there is biodiversity, and then there is International Convention on Biological Diversity, because it is not the human beings that inhabit this space. And there are enormous dependencies within this environment with the other species, with the other ecosystems, with the other habitats. And there are a lot of dependencies, and that make our life possible on this planet. And therefore, it is considered necessary from international point of view that this biodiversity should be prevailed and should continue. Then there is this hazardous material and activities, and then Basic Convention on the control of transboundary movement of hazardous waste and their disposal. It is not only the transboundary, but it is also the management and the generation of the waste that should be controlled under these according to this international convention. Then there is a very important and basically convention, and for the cultural preservation, that the convention concerning the protection of the world cultural and natural heritage, because the cultural heritage is not created in a day, it is not created in centuries. It is the product of the society over thousands of years. And then once any cultural heritage is destroyed, it cannot be replicated. It cannot be reproduced. This hasn't got this capacity. Similarly, the natural heritage, the specific geological character, specific geographic characters, topography, and all that, and that is the influences that have made these specific natural heritage over last probably millions of years since the earth came into existence, and how humankind can be so negligent that because of their activities these natural cultural heritage should be destroyed. Then the desertification and the International Convention is United Nations Convention to combat desertification, because the number of human activities are causing, and some are pertinent, we'll come to that discussion, and in case of Gilgit and Baltistan and human activities that are causing this, and that will have a long-term impact on the climate of the world. And next please. Now basically the environmental overview of the area. Now in many cases Gilgit-Baltistan is really very sensitive. We use the term sensitive ecosystem. So what is sensitive ecosystem? Basically there are some ecosystems which are sensitive to small changes. Because the setup of the Gilgit-Baltistan area is such, there are three largest mountain ranges. They meet in Gilgit-Baltistan: Karakoram, Hindu Kush, and Himalayas. For example, outside poles, where there's a permafrost, outside polar regions, the largest three glaciers are in Gilgit-Baltistan. There are valleys, there are rivers, so there's a very intricate system between these mountains and glaciers and rivers and valleys and agriculture and people. And therefore, when we say sensitive, means, say for example, there are ecosystems, and all ecosystems are sensitive. But then some ecosystems, they result in significant change and movement as a result of small change. And that's what we have been saying in David's presentation and other presentation, and how sensitive these ecosystems are. So basically, that is the overview of that. And basically, the impacts that take place in Gilgit-Baltistan, the environmental changes, these are not only restricted, because in other areas, for example, there will be changes taking place which will be more localized and regional. The reason is that Gilgit and Baltistan, the rivers that go through that, they basically irrigate 2,000 kilometers straight. I'm not talking about the area. It'll be millions of square miles. The sustenance of that area depends upon the rivers that are fed by the glaciers in Gilgit and Baltistan. And how climate change can influence that situation will influence all the areas downline from Gilgit and Baltistan and Sindhi. Next please. Now, basically, I'll quickly go through that because that has been discussed. These all are as I said, my emphasis will be on the environmental impacts of man-made activities, the development, so-called development activities. So, say for example, these are three, basically major development, so-called activities taking in that area, and which are development of large basically large infrastructure projects, and which includes roads, railways, pipelines. Then there is enormous and extensive mining in that area, and then, so these are the development, so-called development projects in that area that we believe, and we have got significant evidence and more that has been confirmed by our other speakers, will have severe impact on environment in Gilgit and Baltistan as well as downline. Now, so this is Karakoram Highway, a 1,300 kilometer long stretch, and basically it is planned that its capacity will be tripled. It will be widened from 10 to 30 meters, and these both projects are built by China. So we will look at the political implications of that. And next, please. Now okay. Now, very briefly, because again these have been discussed, that melting of glaciers, because what is happening as a result of road building and as a result of increasing its transport capacity to 3 times, it will increase basically the vehicular emissions. And vehicular emissions, the carbon soot and all that, and they are one of the important factors in causing the glaciers to melt. To melt basically, and it will damage, of course, the ecosystems in the way that of these road building and loss of productive agricultural land, and then also resettlement of large number of people basically, because even the demography of Gilgit and Baltistan is very sensitive. There are 2 million people. There are only 2 million people. Just one incident, and that caused a displacement of 80,000 people. Another incident in Iskadu caused a displacement of 200,000 people. Now, if you combine these two, that makes 300,000 people. Now, 300,000 people after 2 million people is very simple. It's 15% of the population, of the entire population. So, this is a very sensitive demographic situation, which can then further deteriorate. And basically, as demographic change accelerates the urbanization, so rather than a sustainable development, it is abrupt, and also roads are associated with the air pollution and introducing the diseases in that area. Fortunately, and I sometimes say unfortunately, or fortunately probably would be the right thing to say, that there are thousands of mines. There are thousands of mines, and Hamid Khan discussed that just only the gold mines are in the hundreds, but then there are gemstones, there is silver, there is platinum, everything in the world that you can think of a mine can be, that is in Gilgit and Baltistan. Next, please. Now, what is happening in the last 10-20 years? A part of that was given to China. Recently, there have been hundreds of mine leases have been either given to China or to Pakistani establishment related peoples. And as a result of that, there has been a significant increase in mining activities in Gilgit and Baltistan. Next, please. Now, the first casualty is the removal of topsoil. So you remove Say if a mine is 100 kilometers square, for example, first thing you do, you take everything off it. You remove all the topsoil, you take the entire ecosystems that inhabit that land. So that's the first schedule. Then the mining, even throughout the world, it has been associated, related release of toxins, arsenic, petrol, oil, then which are used either in processing the extraction process, and even once it is left, once it is finished, okay, the impacts of mines even in the developed countries. Say for example, I was reading an article that even in USA, they are really worried about the leftover mines because they create acidic water, they created poisonous water, and that destroy all the ecosystems. The flora, the fauna, the animals, the human, and it affects the